Assalamu alaikum. As we said in the last lecture, the Medina Constitution outlined 5 very important principles: citizenship, justice, pluralism, security, and defense. I want to also mention, in terms of defense, when we look at most of the Muslim countries today, most of these countries cannot even defend themselves. They require foreign countries to defend them. And that results in the kind of destruction of their own countries and neighboring Muslim countries that we would find either in the Gulf War or in the Iran-Iraq War or in many other wars that are taking place, such as within Afghanistan, that is fratricidal, that is taking place within the Muslim world. But these are principles, obviously, and we wonder why they're not being written about. Probably, my hunch would be that they're not being written about because it would require that we would have to change every Muslim government. And I'm sure that the leaders of these governments do not have that on the top of their agenda. Rather, let the people stay busy with minutiae, with all these other concerns, because otherwise there might be a global intifada that would result in the change of the whole landscape of the world and the whole structure of the world economy, and so on and so forth. But regardless, these are principles that at least we can view and study and look at and see how it applies to us, what Islam is telling us to do in terms of that vehicle. Muhammad Asad mentions a very important point about the Islamic State, and I agree with him on this opinion. He first outlines how all the successors to the Prophet were elected differently in becoming the heads of state. Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, and Ali radiallahu anhum were all elected differently. Abu Bakr elected by chiefs of Muhajirs and Ansar. Omar, who was actually appointed by Abu Bakr but was then ratified later by a group. Uthman was chosen by a council of 6 that Omar had actually put together before his death. Ali was elected as the head of state in a congregation at the Prophet's mosque who pledged loyalty to him. Each process, therefore, is different. And if these are the people who are the closest to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, it shows to us that there's no monolithic form of an Islamic state. And therefore, as Muhammad Asad says, the Islamic State is a means. It's not a goal within itself. It's a means for justice. It's a means to really apply the principles that we find in the Sharia, and therefore the effort, the ijtihad that needs to be made by scholars and jurists to understand these principles and to apply them in their modern society becomes more and more important. And even as we talk today about the Islamic State and the need for an Islamic State, I think very few people really know what they're talking about when they say such a term, because it's not just a vehicle to them, it's the goal. And they feel that once it's created, then all the problems are solved, everything will be okay, we'll all be united, every social evil will be cured, and so on and so forth. So we need to understand that there is a process that has to be undertaken, and therefore we ourselves need to understand these processes through the principles that we find from the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and the Quran itself. As the Quran says, man, or humanity, is God's vicegerent on earth. Therefore, the Islamic State should be the embodiment of that vicegerency. We talked before about the Quranic verse that says, obey God and obey the apostle and obey those from whom you have entrusted authority. There is that process of entrustment in the Quran itself. And in terms of justice, which is the highest ethical value in Islam, as the Quran says, justice is next to piety. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, help your brother, be he a wrongdoer or wronged. And thereupon a man exclaimed, O apostle of God, I may help him if he is wronged, but how could I help him if he is a wrongdoer? The prophet answered, you must prevent him from doing wrong. That will be your way of helping him. This is found in Al-Bukhari and in Muslim, this particular hadith. So justice is something that is obviously important, and the prevention of injustice as described in this particular hadith is also very important. The Quran says that we should enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong. To underscore that point, we look at the interests of people, al-maslaha, which I believe Dr. Hattout had explained to you in previous lectures. What is al-maslaha? Al-Ghazali defines al-maslaha as that which consists of consideration which secure the benefit or prevent a harm. So we look at al-maslaha. It promotes a benefit or prevents a harm, and this is exactly what the Quran says: enjoining what is the doing of right and forbid the doing of wrong, promote the social benefits, prevent the harms in society. But Al-Ghazali goes on to say they are simultaneously harmonious with the objectives of the Sharia, the Maqasid al-Sharia, which again Dr. Hattout had gone over before, but it's important to review at this time, and that is the 5 goals of Sharia, which are to secure and develop life, mind, faith, property, and family. So we have a framework for understanding more in terms of what we need to do in terms of promoting what is right for society, all these values, and anything that goes against any of these goals of Sharia would be the priority in terms of opposing, as a matter of, again, a Quranic injunction to forbid what is wrong. This would then take us to the area of working for justice and jihad, which is the struggle that is so often spoken about. There's an important hadith that deals with jihad and deals with justice. And this hadith is found in Muslim on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, that says the highest kind of jihad is to speak up for the truth in the face of a government that deviates from the right path. So it's not the highest form of jihad to go and kill yourself. It's not the highest form of jihad to go and utter out the rhetoric and point your finger and shout at the highest volume you can on the microphone. But the highest form of jihad is to speak out if a government deviates from the right path, if a government is on the track of injustice. This is exactly what MPAC's mission is in terms of bringing this society, working with others in doing so, in bringing this society closer to the divine values of justice. Now, why do I mention these points? Because it's important to note that these are not values and issues that are unique to Muslims or unique to Islam. These are human values as well. If we look at just the writings of some of the founding fathers of America, you would see these points very, very clearly. For example, James Wilson, who said, and he's one of the first U.S. Supreme Court justices. He said, "The will of God is the supreme law. His just and full right of imposing laws and our duty in obeying them are the sources of our moral obligations. The will of God equals our conscience, our reason, and our holy scriptures." You would think that this person had studied the Medina Constitution and came up with this statement by formulating such opinions. This is a commonality that we would find in many of the statements of the Founding Fathers. This is ironic because many people feel that America, being a secular country, would have nothing to do with religion. But in fact, when you read many of the constitutional statements that are made by our Founding Fathers, you would see it filled with religious sentiment. For example, Benjamin Franklin said, "Resistance to tyranny is obedience to God." Thomas Jefferson said, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just." George Washington said, "Of all the dispositions and habits which led to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. Patriotism is in vain without them." Madison, who is the founder of the First Amendment, said, "Religion flourishes in greater purity without than with the aid of government." Madison's statement is important because I think that right there explains the argument, a constitutional argument, against faith-based initiative. Because when we're talking about religion, it flourishes in greater purity without the aid of government. But yet when you have the aid of government for religion, then this is something that actually contaminates religion. In Europe, the head of state is associated with the religion. The people then are not with that head of state. Therefore, they are not really religious. In America, the concept, therefore, of separation of church and state really means that the government should not represent the dominant religion or should not aid any particular religion. And this statement underscores that point very nicely. John Adams, one of the first presidents of the United States, said, Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Otherwise, the change of rulers and governments is simply an exchange of tyrants and tyrannies." These are important things to remember when we look at our religious principles with respect to justice and the Founding Fathers' statements with respect to religion. That Islam is not speaking purely in terms of what is religious, but is talking also in terms of how religion can become the vehicle for justice. But if it is not used in the right way, it can also become a vehicle for injustice. And the Founding Fathers basically made the point that this system of American democracy will not work without a moral fabric, without a society that talks about religion and is religious in itself. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.